Considering that my historical arena of choice is World War II, it genuinely surprises me that some of my favourite stories that I've done on this channel, which is entirely relevant because I do it for you guys, not me, are the prequel ones that I've done. The two stories which were set in Dudley, Belgium, are quite close to my heart because I managed to tie them directly into my childhood and my hometown. The stories with Lucius in Libya and the Brooke prequel both tickle me a little bit because I quite like setting up future stories or working off Easter eggs or taking a small detail from one of the World War II stories and just wildly expanding it. It's something I'll likely do in future episodes, potentially with the backstory for Colonel Sorokin from Purgatory, and maybe for the origins of some of the other monsters that we've seen so far. But if you've watched NIGHE through to the end, you've probably realised by now that we're not going to see poor Tira or her family again, because they're all very dead now. Scapa Flow was the principal Royal Navy base and the home for the main fleet during both of the World Wars. It's a part of the Orkney Isles, which is naturally sheltered by three larger neighbouring islands. And it's also quite shallow, where there's a maximum depth of about 60 metres. I think the average depth is about 30 metres there. Its suitability as a safe place to anchor is demonstrated by the fact they've found archaeological remains of Viking longships there, which would have used the bays to shelter from the horrific weather in the past. And for the British, you were looking for a main base at the start of the Great War. Scapa Flow was perfect. Even without any additional defences, it was already too problematic to attack, being as it was too shallow for submarines to easily approach, and it was out of the range of any enemy aircraft. But to reinforce this, during the first year of the war, the Admiralty took 60 ships and sunk them around the approaches to the main bays as block ships. They also set up a series of anti-shipping booms, anti-submarine nets, and a network of remote-controlled mines. And these all worked perfectly to defeat the only two German incursions into the base of World War I. In November 1914, U-18 tried to make its way through the submarine nets. Unfortunately, it got stuck and had to surface, at which point one of the picket boats saw it and rammed the submarine, which was then forced to surface and sank, but lost one crew member in the process. Fast forward to October 1918, and UB-116 again tried to breach the defences. Unfortunately for that crew, they were detected on hydrophones trying to enter the anchorage, and the British triggered the electric mine network, which then destroyed the sub and killed all 36 sailors on board. At the end of the war, the German fleet was placed into captivity, and 74 battleships were sailed to Scapa Flow and anchored in a part of the facility known as Gutter Sound. And they stayed there for some time whilst the Allies bickered and argued with each other who was going to get what ships. Finally, after 9 months in captivity, the German captains decided they'd had enough, waited until the British fleet was out of harbour, and then opened the seacocks on their ships and sabotaged them so they couldn't be closed. There were very few British forces left at the base at the time, but what they were managed to beach 21 of the ships and save them from sinking, which unfortunately meant that 53 of them went underwater. The majority of these were salvaged in quite a complex operation over the coming years, and there's 7 of them still there today. The Royal Navy base closed in 1956, and diving on those ships is now the main pull for military historians and diving enthusiasts to visit the area. If you're a bit of a sad act like me and just non-stop read up on military history, there's a common theme in the British approach to declaring war at the outbreak of World War II, and that was very much, it'll be all right. And that was certainly true at Scapa Flow. In the 30 years since the base had been put there, there'd been no effort to maintain the defences at the outbreak of World War II. A lot of the block ships had disintegrated and submarine nets had also degraded, and there'd been no additional air defences put in there, which is ridiculous given that aeroplanes were now very good at sinking ships. So, with a bit of a mixture of hope and arrogance, the Royal Navy declared war on Germany and said, Scapa Flow's a long way away from airfields, and it's quite hard for a submarine to get in there, so it'll be fine. Edit. It was not fine. On the 14th of October 1939, Gunter Prine, who was commanding U-47, managed to thread his way through the degraded defences, line up the British fleet and open fire. He then turned tail and ran, stopped and realised that no one was following him, so fired again. This time, this spread of torpedoes found the World War I battleship, the Royal Oak, and sank that ship, killing over half of the 1,400 crew aboard. Prine managed to escape and quickly became poster boy for the Kriegsmarine, which it's led to believe is a role he was less than comfortable with. He went on to have a further 8 more successful patrols in U-47, his popularity increasing with each patrol until February of 1941, when U-47 was part of a wolf pack that attacked a British convoy off the coast of Ireland. Prine's sub was attacked by a number of the British escorts and repeatedly depth charged, never surfaced and never returned to base, and U-47 remains one of a diminishing number of U-boats whose wreckage is yet to be found. The following week, desperate to get in on the action, Hermann Göring ordered the Luftwaffe to attack Scapa Flow, and 4 Junkers Ju-88 attacked. They were able to cause significant damage to one of the training ships there, HMS Iron Duke, losing one of their number in progress. This would finally prompt the British into massively upgrading the defences there. An airfield was constructed and built at the location, and the naval defences were increased. A plan was then hatched in 1944 by Hitler to attack Scapa Flow one further time with missiles. Now, the missile is one of the oddest weapons the German came up with, and it's essentially a fighter such as a Messerschmitt or a Focke-Wulf with a bomber strapped underneath it. The fighter flies over the target and releases the bomber, which is full of bombs, and it lands on the target. That's the theory. As I say, in Hitler in 1944, much as with the Ardennes campaign, believed that a successful attack by missiles and Scapa Flow would shock the Allies and motivate them to come to peace talks against the Russians. Given the distance involved, the complete unreliability of that weapon and the defences, this would have been the definition of a suicide mission. As it was cancelled quite rightly at the last minute, and instead the missiles that had been allocated were sacrificed in vain efforts to try and stop the Soviet advance on the Eastern Front. And unsurprisingly, they weren't massively successful when they were used. As is increasingly common with the characters that I find to use, I've deployed a hell of a lot of poetic license in my depiction of the NIGHE, which is a genuine Scottish spirit. I've played them as a dying race of elf and fairy folk, inadvertently slaughtered as a result of the selfish Royal Navy taking up residence next door, which is not what the NIGHE is. The NIGHE is one of many depictions of a banshee, or ban Sith, which is the Gaelic name for them. Not sure if that's where the Sith in Star Wars came from. Like the other banshees, the NIGHE is an omen of death for anyone unlucky enough to see her, and she's most commonly depicted as a washerwoman of indeterminate age at the water's edge, cleaning blood-soaked clothing. That clothing is, in legend, the clothing of those who are about to die, and if she's successful in cleaning them, you die. However, if as a generic witness you are bold or brave enough to approach her unobserved and catch hold of her, your death is not only prevented, but you gain 3 wishes. Yay! Or you die. Not so yay. In 1742, it was rumoured that a woman from Cromarty had encountered a bizarre washerwoman on the shores of Loch Slin, who was cleaning a large number of bloodstained clothes and disappeared when she was encountered. Days later, halfway through a service, the roof of Fern Abbey collapsed and killed 50 members of the congregation, with the NIGHE being blamed for that tragedy. One of the interesting things about the NIGHE and banshees in general is that it's a repeated legend found in cultures from all over the world, regardless of geography. In Africa, these spirits are known as Madame Koi Koi, nothing to do with a fish. In Mexico, you have La Llorona. And in Germany, I'm not going to pronounce this right, you've got the Klagmoom, or the Wailing Aunt, which is a wonderful name. On one hand, the fact that you have this recurring female portender of death in every culture would suggest there must be a little bit of truth to it for it to be happening everywhere, with no ability for these different cultures to share the legend with each other. On the other hand, does it just say a little bit more about the patriarchy and the fact that men get very angry and decide that vengeful women are murdering spirits after they die? I don't know. Who's to say? One interesting little news bulletin to end this video on is that I've been contacted by a relative of one of the crew from HMS Dasher, who reached out to me when she was aware of the fact that we'd done the video. The families of a lot of the people who died on HMS Dasher have, it transpires, been fighting for years to try and force an official response out of the government and the Royal Navy about rumours that there were a great many unidentified bodies that washed ashore in the Firth of Forth after the disaster, and rather than being identified, they were lumped into mass graves and buried. If that is true, that's an utter disgrace, and it's something that needs to be rectified immediately. The Royal Navy apparently have been contacted by the families over the years and have consistently denied that. I've reached out back. There's some conversations going on. Could potentially lead to something between the channel and between the relatives moving forward. If it does, I'll keep you posted on that. Outside of that, as ever, I hope all is well with you. Hope all is well for those that you care about. And I'll see you next time round. Goodbye.